Hello, everyone. My name is Jacob Smith, and this is a quick presentation over the organization cybersecurity policy and executive summary. Diving right in, we have some creation and changes to different types of standards. So these are essentially steps that have to be taken in order to create or change different types of standards. What we first noticed is that we have to identify the need of the organization. Once the need is identified, we put together a committee which consists of industry levels experts to research that specific need of the organization. Once that research is conducted, the committee is put together. We will conduct a study. The committee will then research the need and develop an outline for new standards. So this is going to create the framework or essentially the baseline of the new standards. And then we're going to have a consensus. This essentially the committee will come together, approve a draft, and send it to review. Once it's sent to review, the public will review it, send back information, send back their feedback, which then leads us to our approval stage, which the feedback will then be incorporated by the committee, and then the committee will conduct a final approval, and then we can publish. And essentially, that is how a new standard will be created within the organization. It'll finally be published and released. Then we want to go over the organization NIST cybersecurity framework and how our organization aligns with this NIST cybersecurity framework. For starters, we have to identify. The first step is identifying uh, risk. It's identifying what assets are valuable to the company and what type of risks those assets carry. Then we have to protect. We have to implement firewalls. We have to utilize VPNs to restrict network traffic. And then a very important security control we have to implement is the principle of least privilege. What this does is, because we are an institution, a university, students and teachers will only be allowed to access information that is vital for their studies, vital for their research, and vital for their job. Then we will move into our detecting phase, and how we align with the cybersecurity framework here is we monitor network traffic. We have IT department specific. Their specific focus is monitoring network traffic. And then we also work on implementing intrusion detection and intrusion prevention systems. All of this is there to help detect malicious behavior before it's too late. Excuse me. Then we have respond. So once an event or an intrusion is detected, we have a response plan in place to help isolate data breaches and prevent the data breach or malicious software from spreading to the rest of the system. We have to train employees over a proper line of communication. So when in the event that an incident does take place, an intrusion does happen, in the event of a cyber attack, employees need to know who to report to, and how to report anything that they see or detect. And then, obviously, when responding to an event, we have to isolate it to protect the rest of the system. We have to isolate the affected system. Then, for our final phase, we have the recover phase. And how we align in that is we have to restore all of our affected systems. Obviously, we need to regularly have regular backups, frequent backups, so that when a it's a matter of when, not if, but when if a system is affected, we can restore it, we can isolate it, clean it, wipe all the malicious software off of it, and then we can restore that system back to our most frequent backup. And then we need to incorporate data or documents. We need to incorporate documented lessons learned and use that to update to have a more up-to-date response plan. Next, we have the organization security policy. So we focus on four areas here. We have to ensure that users can only access information vital to their job or school research. Guidelines are in place to ensure users comply with security regulations. So there's a proper behavior when accessing the network. Social media is a big player in today's world. So social media will only be used to promote the institution, and to inform students, inform faculty, inform potential students, prospects of what it's like, what campus life is like, and the benefits of our institution. And then finally, only devices with approved software updates or that are provided by the institution can access the network. So we will have regulations on software that are on devices, and they will have to go through the IT department to be confirmed and approved to access the network. And this keeps our network more secure. Here we have the organization systems and network diagram. As you can see, there's a lot going on here, but essentially this is the flow of information through our network. We have our demilitarized zone up here in the green box. We have plenty of intrusion protection systems and firewalls in place to, one, monitor network traffic and prevent malicious behavior from taking place in our network. We have our data storage over here in this yellow box. And then we do break out into a VLAN. So our virtual local area network here is where we have essentially students, patients, and then we have our HR department and our accounting department. And then we have our first floor and second floor here on separate, on the primary server, actually. Going into our organization risk assessment, the business impact analysis, and business continuity plan. So there's a lot to unpack on this page. For starters, we have our risk assessment, and conducting a risk assessment, we find a couple high risk findings. These are risks that pose the greatest threat to our organization. We have malware attacks, access misconfigurations, and remote access, because students can access school information, school data on a local Wi-Fi or a public Wi-Fi, excuse me. Remote access does pose a certain level of risk to our network system and sensitive data. Then we have our business continuity plan. So a couple things we do to continue business and to make sure we respond effectively in the event that an incident does take place. We have to, again, isolate the affected system to prevent malware spread. We need to restore affected systems from the latest backup. And then we need to also document lessons learned and update that into the incident response plan, um, so that we can focus on new identifiers and we can be better prepared in the event that this same incident or something similar to it does happen again. And then we have our business impact analysis. So we want to analyze how an incident will impact the business. We will prioritize risks by potential impact. So when we conduct our studies and we know what risks we are most vulnerable to, we can then assign those risks high, medium, or low. Uh, we can assign them as high, medium, or low risks, meaning high risk obviously poses the greatest threat and the greatest impact if it does take place, and then low risks obviously not as concerned, but it is still on our radar. This will allow us to prioritize our resources and focus on the high risk um, threats. That way we can mitigate vulnerabilities, mitigate risks, and maintain a secure network. We will conduct a cost benefit analysis to determine a financial impact. Obviously, money is a big factor. Finances is a big factor in security. So we want to make sure we're putting our money in security and maintaining a strong, secure network, and then focusing on those areas that pose the greatest risk to the organization. And then we want to implement compensating controls for non-compliant systems. So when controls are not working as they should, we want to have those compensating controls in place. That way we can get non-compliant systems up to compliance, which, one, will ensure greater security for the network, but also will prevent us from facing severe fines. And then finally, we have the organization tier, which, from research, the institution is a tier 3. It means it's repeatable. We have received executive approval of our security approach, and then we are also very equipped to deal with vulnerabilities, cybersecurity risks, and threats. Next, we have the different types of standards. So just comparing and contrast real quick. We have laws, regulations, policies, voluntary, and framework-based standards. Laws are clearly, they're rules made by government entities. They're enacted by a legislative body that everyone must follow. A couple examples: the Health Information Portability and Accountability Act of 1996, other known as HIPAA. In the health industry, this is a major, major, major one. So that's a quick example of a law that has to be followed and abided by. Then we have regulations, which are more of detailed instructions on how laws are carried out and enforced. A good example of this, and one of the biggest and toughest regulations out there, is the European Union General Data Protection Act regulation. So it's the GDPR. That affects so many companies and so many organizations, and it affects us because we deal with students that are from Europe. Um, and any of their information will require us to abide and maintain compliance with GDPR. Then we have policies, which they set the foundation for a policy base. They are high-level business rules that define how the organization will protect information. Voluntary, it's as simple as it is. It's a set of standards that companies have the option to adopt. It's more of a strong suggestion that these standards should be abided by. They should be implemented in an organization um, to help better protect and secure network and sensitive data. And then finally, we have a framework base, which is they're based on principles that allow for the flexibility when designing and implementing processes. A big one here, a great example, is the NIST cybersecurity framework that I referred to earlier in this presentation. Next, we have the incident response and incident handling plan. So this is going through how we're going to respond and handle an incident. So obviously we want to detect it early. We want to be swift in our response time. We will then analyze and review each event and identify different indicators. So what we could have noticed and recognized uh, earlier on to prevent an incident from spreading. Then we will have prioritization. So we need to prioritize events to better manage resources. That goes back to the high risk. Anything that is of higher risk, we want to prioritize and focus more resources there. Then we have notifying. So this is essential. We got to the organization, it is our responsibility to notify any and all affected customers, business partners, regulators, and any law enforcement agencies. Then we want to contain this event. This incident needs to be contained so that we can stop the spread from the rest of the system. We want to preserve as much of the network system as possible. Then we have the recovery, which obviously we want to eradicate all malware and then start rebuilding our system again. And then finally, we have the incident review, which is we review the events, we review documentation, we implement lessons learned to be better prepared for the future. Here, real quick, we have our cybersecurity awareness infographic. As you can see here are the top 10 web application security risks according to OWASP. We have risk implications of internet use, and then we have the methods to develop and implement security for web applications. This is posted throughout the facility. And then finally, we have our executive summary. So this focuses on what our current threats are, the security measures we're putting in place to mitigate those threats, and then potential risks and our action plan. So obviously our current threats, as discussed before, are malware, access misconfigurations, and remote access. In order to mitigate those risks, in order to mitigate those threats, we have intrusion detection and prevention systems in place. We have VPN requirements and firewalls in place. And then we have security controls that limit network access so we can better monitor the network when we have less traffic on the network. And then we have our potential risks. So in the event that these threats take place, unauthorized users will gain access to sensitive student data, and that can be incredibly costly. Not only will it hurt our rapport and our trust with our students, but it could be financially damaging. And then we could potentially have malware infecting the system, causing significant data loss. Yes, having regular backups can help us restore that data, but it's still a headache if it does happen and take place. Finally, our action plan is implement strict security controls, increase network monitoring, monitor malicious behavior, and then obviously require specific software standards to prevent unprotected devices from accessing the network. Thank you for your time. This is all my references. Thank you.